Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I want to welcome you to another episode of Zoom In on the Halal Metropolis. Today, I'm very excited to be visiting with Fayrouz Saad. Fayrouz Saad is the Executive Director of the Office of Global Michigan. Hi, Fayrouz. How are you doing?
Hi, good, thank you.
So the point of this project is to find out how the Muslim community is, coping with the COVID pandemic, and also sort of like what people are doing um, to try and make things better here in Michigan. So I'm really interested in your office because obviously we've just transitioned from this period of outright hostility to immigration, to migration, to refugee arrival, to immigrants from the Muslim world. And now we have a new presidential administration. So this isn't entirely COVID related, right? But we have a new administration which has a new ambition and openness to the rest of the world. And so I can only imagine that the work of your office has really intensified over the last few months. But anyway, but instead of me speaking, so why don't you tell us more about what your office does? I don't think that very many people know about the Office of Global Michigan.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell people about our office because you're right, it's not very well known. So first of all, I should start by saying the Office of Global Michigan was formerly known as the Michigan Office of New Americans, or MONA as short. So some people might be more familiar with that name. It was created under Governor Snyder. And then in 2019, Governor Whitmer renamed the office, appointed me as executive director, and then moved it over to the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, believing that, economic equity and economic integration would be really core to our mission, and was already pretty core to our mission, to be perfectly honest. And so the office is made up of the state's Office of Refugee Services. So the office that really oversees the state's refugee resettlement program, working directly with the Office of Refugee Resettlement within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and then also our local service providers, refugee resettlement agencies, and other community service providers. It includes a program called the Michigan International Talent Solutions, which it was up until October of 2020 a direct service provider that worked with high skilled immigrants, degreed immigrants who possessed some sort of post-secondary degree from overseas and needed help kind of integrating back within their professionalized field.
Mm-hmm.
However, due to a number of reasons, national immigration trends changing, the refugee resettlement program having changed so drastically under the former administration, and then a bunch of local budgetary constraints, we've kind of reshifted the office to also go more in line with this, this programming and this narrative around centering things around equity conversations. And so our MITS program, still called MITS, is now working with internal state programs and agencies to help them each lower barriers for immigrants and refugees, and really the international community broadly being able to access state resources and services. And then we also oversee the stage 3 statewide ethnic commissions, which are government appointed commissions: the Hispanic and Latino Commission, the Middle Eastern Commission, and the Asian and Pacific American Commission. So essentially the governor has charged us with helping advise on federal and local immigration policy, immigrant integration programs. But then, of course, because of the nature of our work, we end up working across state government on a variety of things, everything from COVID, relief, dissemination of information, translating materials, to workforce development programs, or issues even with the Secretary of State. So we find ourselves pulled in a lot of different directions.
Well, so I mean, so what has this last period been like for you? I mean, I don't even know how, I can't even imagine how COVID would have affected your life, other than the fact that you seem to be working at home like I am. So how has COVID affected our ability to provide services to refugees or other immigrants?
Well, first I will say that, I've been pretty impressed at how a lot of our state services and our state partners have adjusted to this new virtual and work from home environment to be able to ensure continuity of services, but also continue to work on improving access to services. Now, we're not a direct service provider, as I kind of indicated with some of our programs, but really, quite broadly, we're not a direct service provider. So we work mostly with our partners, advocates, activists, organizations that are on the ground that are direct service providers, to help really help them better deliver their services, or again, access state government resources and programs. So, I mean, it's definitely, at the beginning, I think, definitely presented a challenge, and how do we continue to do that? And then more importantly, how do we identify what are the challenges and the needs on the ground that have arisen because of this crisis? And then look at how we can really fill the gaps in our office personally, and helping address those needs. And so over the last year, we've done a number of things to try and improve on that. One is, at the onset of the pandemic, within our office, actually Karen Philippi, who a lot of people know, who's a member of the Office of Global Michigan, a staff person here, she worked with Leo leadership and others across state government to make funding available for like the immediate translation of information directly related to COVID. And so now anything COVID related is translated into about 4 to 6 languages at least. And languages were based off of the input from our 3 statewide ethnic commissions, recent refugee arrivals, and really making sure that we were addressing as best as we can language access needs of the community. We also work directly with our 3 statewide ethnic commissions to host a number of information sessions, bringing in the necessary experts to help provide information in whatever language or culturally sensitive environment it needed to be in. So we had like workforce development program trainings. We had a small business information session working directly with our ethnic chambers of commerce. And we did a number of things around the census as well, because that was still going on over this year, So, there's still this like continuity of business and things that needed to happen anyway. And then of course, addressing the challenges that arose because of COVID.
Yeah, the census is still, for me, it's just a white knuckle ride because it's so important. And it just seems like there were so many, the odds against us getting a really good count were just so, there were so many challenges last year to doing a full census. And for one of the populations that you serve, the Middle Eastern community, I mean, it was really a bad year because the Census Bureau had, I mean, as you know, the Census Bureau had recommended and had advised to the government that we include a Middle Eastern and North African category. And the Trump administration turned that down. So we're going to go for another 10 years with having inadequate reporting on the Middle Eastern population in the state. And as a historian who writes about this community very specifically, this is just devastating news for me and for so many of the service providers in the community. Well, so are things looking up in terms of refugee arrivals and new immigrants to the state? Are things looking up with the travel ban gone? Are we going to see the arrival of more, the reunification of more Yemeni families in particular?
Well, hopefully a lot of people have seen some of the announcements that have been made by the Biden administration. I think, at least in my opinion, it's been clear that immigration is a priority. So that's really exciting to see. There's been executive order and legislative packages about everything from a pathway to citizenship to DACA to refugee arrivals. And so yes, from our perspective, things are looking up. It's a really exciting time. We're seeing a lot of these things that we've really been hoping for so long start to be real ideas that are set forward, and then now there's a pathway to discussion about them and hoping some things coming through. Now, with that in mind, the position of the Office of Global Michigan and a lot of the other states across the country that we work with that have programs similar to ours really believe that it's time for the federal government to take a more holistic approach to looking at immigration and refugee resettlement. And so, I think that prior to this, there's certain lenses that it's discussed through. I think a border lens, a security lens, it's strictly like refugee arrivals. Let's, constantly be talking about how we can increase the ceiling on refugee arrivals and welcome more people into the country. And that part is great, but then we also have to remember that, immigrants and refugees then come to places like Michigan and they need affordable housing and access to good schools and jobs and programming and then, language access and so on and so forth, right? And so there's so much to be done at the state and local level when immigrants and refugees arrive that a lot of times doesn't have the federal support that we need to get it done. And so in addition to really wanting to see these like bold initiatives carried on and certainly seen through, I think we really start to need to rethink how we talk about immigration at a federal level and the federal government's approach. And I think that there have been those conversations. So I know that there's been a lot of advocacy for a federal Office of New Americans based in the White House. Within the Biden administration's refugee plan, I think it also called on a coordinator again within the White House that would help coordinate the refugee resettlement and the increase of arrivals, which is positive because hopefully it just offers like a central place where someone can bring in all the agencies and offices across federal government necessary to talk about these things. Because with the refugee arrivals, we have to remember that the Trump administration really hollowed out the infrastructure that is necessary to do that resettlement. And so while we would love to see the 125,000 that's been put forward by the administration, we have to make sure we're very thoughtful in how we get there. And the most important thing is rebuilding the state and local infrastructure so that when refugees arrive, we can resettle them in a way that allows for their successful integration into the country.
Yeah, I did a project a few years ago, a project with one of my classes where we interviewed Iraqi families that had come here as refugees. We interviewed the people who came from Rough House, so they came in the 90s. And one of the things that we talked to them about was just their experience of arriving and what it was like and what kind of support they received and who supported them and just what it was like for them to try and acclimate. And most of them weren't sent to Michigan. Most of them, as you know, most of them were resettled in other parts of the country. And then they came here, after they exhausted the resources that were available to them in other places, or really as soon as they could, because they had, family here or friends here, or there was a community infrastructure here that supported them in terms of their, the food and the, religious experience and, all of this. Here they could come in and be a part of a community and not feel like they were starting from scratch in the same way. But one of the things we did was we asked them if they had any advice to give to newly arriving people. At the time, this was sort of early in the Trump years, and we were thinking they were talking to Syrians who were coming, you know, like, what is your advice that you would give to Syrians? And it was really great because they had such great advice, things like mow your lawn, you know. But yeah, the challenges that that people face when they first arrive, and I mean, it's just it's stunning for me to think about. So I really appreciate the fact that you're thinking holistically about what their needs are. That's incredibly important. So I realize that we've run out of time. We've run over our time limit, but I do
Sorry, I
want to
talked a
ask you one
lot.
thing, because I'm concerned. I've been reading a lot about the Asian American community, and the fact that in the face of COVID, there's been sort of an uptick in discrimination, or you know, basically, you know, attacks, racist attacks against Asian Americans. And I just wonder how things are faring for the Asian and Pacific Islander community here in Michigan.
Yeah, it's really concerning what we've seen, and a lot of it has been promulgated by language and words that have been used by, you know, elected leaders, including some here within the state of Michigan. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of concern, and it's legitimate concern. Now, the APA community, though, is working so hard to really address those, you know, concerns, advocate for their folks. And so we've issued, and we've worked alongside them doing that, issuing press releases against language used, helping host, hold, and coordinate town halls, like Know Your Rights town halls, for so they understand what is a hate crime and know how to report that. So, I mean, there is concern, and there will continue to be concern. And I think there's a lot of legitimate fear. And the best that we can do as well within the Office of Global Michigan, but others watching this who have platforms or whatever it might be, is to continue to push back against this narrative, and, you know, really show that we're here as partners for our APA neighbors, and supporting them in however we can.
Well, thank you, Fayrouz. Thank you for the work you do on behalf of the citizens of Michigan, both all of us who've been here for a while and the new arrivals. I really appreciate the work you do, and I thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. And I just want to let anybody in the audience know, if you have a story that you would like to share, get in touch with us. We're happy to learn more about the important work you're doing for the state of Michigan as well. Thank you, Fayrouz.
Thank you.